Thanks, Elizabeth. So we're going to get into some topics today about for the advanced users, and hopefully everybody saw the blogs beforehand. We're going to go over some of the material that was in those blogs and give you an opportunity to ask some questions at the end. I hope to leave enough time for demonstrations that are driven by the questions. So that's really what I'd like us to do today. So let's start with the life cycle. So how can Innoslate support the entire life cycle? A lot of people ask that question. They say, how can one tool do all this? Well, we have designed it to do the entire life cycle, to work across it. And so we particularly use this model if most of you are familiar with the V and how it works. And of course, if you're an advanced user, you can apply Innoslate across that entire life cycle. Some of the key areas that require more depth and knowledge are these I've highlighted, and those are going to be the focus areas today for the presentation. So we're going to go into architecture first, then we're going to talk a little bit about operations and the support side part of the life cycle, again, operations, support, operations, and maintenance. And then, of course, the program management piece of it. So let's talk again first with architecture, and I'm going to focus on the DoD architecture framework because that's the architecture framework that a lot of people are using today. And in fact, if you're not familiar, they're pushing this across the entire federal government, and ultimately also international partners are looking into this as part of bringing together the various frameworks that are out there. Something called the, I think, Unified Architecture Framework is at least the working name I've heard for it, and that's under development. So currently our dedicated DODAF dashboard is set up for the DODAF products themselves. It would be easy to add additional products as the DODAF changes and adjusts over time. It's set up so that the ontology that's used for DODAF, which is the DODAF Meta Model 2.0, which is DM2, is statistics are shown in that bottom left panel. So you can see that we are translating the information from the lifecycle modeling language ontology to the DM2 ontology. So you can be working with that and understand that you have both available to you. It's easy to use this because you basically select what viewpoint you're looking for, and then you can get what specific models underneath those viewpoints are available to you. And then once you actually create one, it will then give you an edit option where you can then edit the vision or whatever else. So the CV1, for example, here is showing that's one of our what we call an asset diagram, but that's also what the CV1 is called the vision for the project. So you click on that, and that'll bring you into our asset diagram framework, but it then tracks all that information as being part of the CV1. And of course, anything you put in the CV1 there will be available to any of the other products where it's appropriate. So we do that as well. If one of the products we output is the physical exchange specification, which is the DM2 XML format that's used with that ontology. There are tools that DoD has built to read that file and be able to work with it and use it, so it is a useful product. We consider that, in fact, our AV2 primary AV2 product, since the AV2 is supposed to be more than just a glossary. It's supposed to be the basically all your relationships and descriptions of information as you've captured in your database. So as you're building these products, make sure you put in that descriptive information for each of the boxes and lines, because that is what the requirement for the AV2 is. Another thing that we found that works extremely well is the fact that being able to take our action diagram and use that, we call that the combined OV5B, OV6C, and that's available in the OV tab. So if you go to the operational view tab, you can click on that, and you can build this diagram. What's nice about that is when you finish, you can also get the individual products. So if you want to see them separately, you can get your sequence diagram, you can get your IW0 diagram. I'll show you those in a second. So that's valuable because now I have one diagram gives me many diagrams available to in the DODAF. And of course, the OB products have their services and systems viewpoint equivalent models. And again, if you use the same technique, the same diagram, it'll be a lot easier for you to understand how that works. And we allow decomposition between those different levels, so you can correctly capture that decomposition from operational viewpoints to services viewpoints to systems viewpoints. Another thing about this diagram, it is executable, which means you can execute our discrete event simulator or Monte Carlo simulator using the same product. So it's right there available to you. It's actually a push button on the diagram that's available to choose which of the simulators you want to run. All the different pieces of information that go into this simulation have the ability to put a variance. So you can go ahead and put different distributions for time, for resources. We can tie costs to this as well. So you get cost information. So you can do cost, schedule, performance kinds of activities with this modeling in the tool. So that's another feature that the advanced user is more likely to use than the beginning or the intermediate user. As I mentioned, one of the things is you get a sequence diagram. This was literally clicking on that previous diagram, and we made the allocation. In fact, let me go back to the previous diagram for a second. We've actually had allocated each of these to different assets on it. Not showing it on this particular picture, but it's available to drag on now. The actual, when you drag on a label for one of these branches, it actually does the allocation automatically to the assets. And so that builds you a diagram like this. If you go just select the sequence diagram out of the option up in the open button for diagrams, you just pull that down and select the sequence diagram. So if you just want a pure OB6C or the services or systems viewpoint equivalents, you get that automatically. Of course, if you prefer to work in this mode, you certainly can work in that mode, and then anything you do there will replicate and go back to the action diagram, and so you could use it either way. Whatever's most comfortable for you, will go back and forth as you need to. All these diagrams are drag and drop capable with a sidebar. If you've been watching the previous webinars and looked at the blogs and you used Innoslate, you know what the sidebar is. It's common for every diagram, and I think you'll find that makes it consistent and easy to understand and use in each of the diagrams. Of course, the IDEF0 version of this, and of course, as everybody knows, I violated a lot of IDEF0 principles in this particular diagram. As you can see, there's more than 6 boxes and things like that, but that's okay. If you really want a pure IDEF0 diagram, all those rules are available to you, and it can rule check it, the diagram, to tell you what you're violating. So I rarely use the IDEF0 by itself myself, but again, a lot of people love this diagram, and it's available in complete package for whatever your needs are. Again, all those are live diagrams that work together. So here's the simulation output. So again, from our executable diagram, which is the action diagram, you can get discrete event. The primary output is a timeline diagram, and you can see that on the left here. And if you notice above it, there's resources. So that's showing resource usage for this particular project. So it's showing a resource use at a later point in time. So again, this is just helpful to you to see how your resource modeling is and starting to look at performance kinds of indicators in your analysis. You also can get cost information if you click on the charts tab. The cost, if you've captured cost information associated with these things, that will also be in that one of those charts. Same thing on the Monte Carlo side. Of course, we just show distributions, and the diagram on the left shows you how much time or how much cost is associated with that particular element, since this is the cost version of it. There's an equivalent time version as well of the diagram on the Monte Carlo. I will note right now the Monte Carlo is only available on our enterprise version. That's available on a variety of different systems now, and we can get you access to that if you need it. We are in the process of moving that to the browser side, and so once that's available, we will make it available again on the cloud for Monte Carlo. So another diagram out of the architecture product world is the classic block diagram. So on the left, you see the classic blocks and diagram lines, and that's a nice way of seeing things very simply. But oftentimes, we want to see it with the pretty pictures. So that's where you can then upload for any object in the database can have a picture. So you just upload an asset diagram and make those connections associated with it, and boxes and lines. And on that asset diagram, you can have a background now. So just add the background, and you have your very pretty OV1 picture, but it's all traceable back to these other kinds of diagrams that you might want to use and look at differently. So that's another feature that's available in the tool. You may or may not be aware. Again, just go right to the OV1 on the tab. If you go to the operational viewpoint, OV1, you click on that and you can build the diagram directly in the tool. Another thing that we have in the diagram is traceability. Since all the relationships are bidirectional, whenever you make a relationship between two entities, it automatically creates the inverse relationship. And so the spider diagram here shows that information. So by clicking any one piece of it, I can see how these relationships are tied to each other. So in the case I'm showing here, it was from the requirements document, was the 1.0, this architecture shall. And so you see decompositions of 1.1 and 1.2, 1.4, 1.3. Those are all decompositions of that particular requirement. And then it ties to other things. So one of the things over here results in a decision where we recognize that we need to have a better definition of what we mean by raw and processed data. So that decision point captures that and lets you look at it and understand what needs to be done, and you can then trace the changes that were made due to that decision associated with it. So that gives you an example of how to work with that. Notice below the 1.0, there's a thing that says TST SOSA. That's actually the specification itself. That's the artifact. And again, all these things, when you're actually in the view, you click on the entity, and the sidebar has all the metadata associated with it, labels, attributes, anything associated with it, and you can work with that information and make changes right there in that diagram. I think for the advanced users, you're going to find the spider diagram is something you're going to use a lot more, because you'll feel more comfortable doing that. Another thing that a lot of times you're looking for is, how do I keep my documentation products, things like the AV1's a document. That's your study plan and your study report for the architecture. And so that's helpful for you to make sure you're tracking that information. So if I'm doing that for the in the architecture view, what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill in this information associated with it, and then I can relate it back to other things in the document when I want to do my actual findings. So the last section of the AV1 is a findings section. So now I can trace to the things that caused me to have those findings. I think if you've heard me talk before, you know I've been on many of these architecture projects, and it's kind of frustrating when you get to the end of this and you're trying to come up with the findings and you want to relate it back to the products and that you developed, right? The architecture products, you spent all this money, time, and energy building these architecture products, and people don't know how they relate how the findings relate to it. That traceability is essential, because that's probably one of the first things a senior person might ask you is, oh, well, where did you get that from? And if you can't tell them what analysis gave you that piece of information, they probably won't believe much else you have to say. And if you've ever had that experience, it's not a lot of fun. Anyway, so take a look at that documents view. It actually is almost like working in Microsoft Word. It's got so many features. You can put in hyperlinks. You can bold, italicize, just all the kinds of word processing things. And then when you want to put it in and make it super pretty, you click the report button, and that outputs it as a Word document, a docx. And so you can go ahead through Microsoft Word and make it as pretty as you want it to be, and have it then be your final product. Note that this is actually the top thing there. If you look at that AV1, it says time-sensitive target, overview, and summary information. That's actually the artifact name that was used there. And so that you can always go to that artifact and find it and work with it there. Let's say you've done something in Word and you want to capture, you just upload that as part of the artifact. And so now you have both the version that's in Innoslate, and you also have the Microsoft Word version that you're tracking and working with. I'm doing this right now on ICD that I'm developing for a customer. And we're finding that to be very helpful in tracking what we're doing and how we're doing it and where things go, particularly for that next phase, which we're about ready to start. Anyway, so using this view helps you a lot with that, and of course that traceability. Another thing you can do is you can link it to risks and decisions. So here's another place where you've gone through the process of putting together your study plan. Somebody approved it, so you might want to show that as a decision. Or somebody might have identified in it a risk to your project for success. And so you might want to then capture that risk at the same time and associate it with what they think is causing the risk. So, or you might want to perform risk analysis on your project and understand what those risks are and capture them that way. So this is another good way of tracing all that together in one place. Another thing about DODAF is there's lots of matrices, and these are ways that you're showing the relationship between different viewpoints, usually. At least many of them are that. Some of them are services. Services is one of the things I'm showing here, so that's within a viewpoint, but still you're trying to understand what those are. What these tables are fully interactive. When you click on the box, it'll put the X or the O in for you. Again, I think with the services matrix, you click it twice and you get to the O, so X and O, you get both of them. And again, they have the legend for what that means in terms of the origin. So this lets you show, and that when you do this, this actually creates relationships behind the scenes between those entities. Also, by the way, in that table, if I clicked on Geospatial Information Services there at the top service, I would actually get the information about that on the sidebar. So again, I can make changes and adjustments to that attribute right there. Okay, I've got another thing coming up here. Okay. Google Calendar is helpful. So anyway, so there are lots of these matrices. You see the number of them over here on the right-hand side. It's a large number, and the reason they do this is that the DODAF is thinking in more of a flat file kind of structure, and so it wants to see these things in a more linear fashion, where now I have these two-dimensional matrices, whereas our ontology is really a multi-dimensional ontology, and so it handles it better, more effectively. But again, this is the way it's done in DODAF, so it's fine. It's a good way to show it to people who want to see things in a simple table. So what's the trick? So you know, here we create this dashboard, and what we ended up doing was to enable this was simply add labels. So one of the first things that's going to happen to you when you go to the DODAF view, dashboard, you bring up the DODAF dashboard, it's going to ask you, can it generate a whole bunch of labels? please say yes, because it works better that way. And so those labels then become available, and as you're working within the dashboard, it automatically puts those labels on it. If for some reason you've been working separately and then you decide, oh yeah, I really do have to do that DODAS stuff, and because that's the way a lot of people look at it. Okay, so if that's the case, then you say, okay, do your work, do your good system engineering work, and then you can just go ahead and start up that dashboard, get those labels, and then you can apply the labels to where they belong. So again, if you understand the relationship between the kinds of diagrams that Innoslate generates and the kind of diagrams you're looking for in DODAF, it's a very easy thing to do. So you can go and work either way, and that lets you then work with how you want to work, not be driven by the tool. So that was why we tried to give you both options, and hopefully, as I said, the best of both worlds here. So that's kind of a very quick overview of our architecture side of the tool. Let me move on to the next topic, and then we'll hit questions afterwards. So please, start thinking about your questions. As I think Elizabeth said, you can start adding in questions as we go in the dashboard. So the next topic was to talk about how we help with operations support or operations and maintenance cycle. So one of the big areas that people forget about is reliability, availability, and maintainability. Those have a huge impact on the support side of the equation. And oftentimes those aren't identified early enough in the process. So one of the things that we've done is when we've developed our architecture process, which you see on the left there, there's specific steps where we can think about where reliability, availability, maintainability should be starting to be thought about and be worked into your actual work. So if we explore a little bit, the context and scenarios should include RAM concerns. So your steps 5 and 6 here, where we're developing the context diagram, which gives you your scope, and the operational scenarios, which are the operationally how I'm going to do the job part. You can think about, well, what kind of issues with reliability, availability, maintainability do I need to deal with there? Aspects of those scenarios will help drive you thinking about it. Particularly when you start thinking about having problems. Step 11 is a lot about defining resources, error detection, recovery. That hits it particularly very hard at that point. Also, we should recognize that capturing constraints has a lot of RAM information as well, because, well, those reliability, availability, and maintainability requirements become constraints on the problem. And so, again, we can address it there as well. And, of course, finally, in step 13, where we're doing a demonstration master plan or a test and evaluation master plan, you would be building that plan and thinking about, well, how do I demonstrate this RAM capabilities so that we know when we do get to that final stage of things after the architecture, we're doing that transition into operations support, we have that capability. One of the things that you'll find is if you take this analysis, the kind of RAM analysis you do on the current operational and support system, it'll help drive a lot of your gaps and identify your gap analysis. So if you can work with that, that helps you a lot. And then as you're actually building as you go into the development cycle, how do I fix those problems? How do I make it a more reliable, available, and maintainable system? You can add those factors in as you go. One of the things you'd like to do is, from these predictions that happen in the early phase, is see how well they test out in operations support. So again, you want to track that all the way through the process to make sure when I'm in operations support, I am making those predictions and they are correct. It's like any other simulation. Unless your simulator is calibrated, it doesn't have any meaning. Those of you probably are in the expert world of modeling simulation know the adage that we talk about, all models are wrong, some models are useful. That's because all models are wrong because no model is perfect. We always make abstractions, we always make assumptions in a model to make it work. And then you're creating that as you're doing your modeling. Well, okay, so then is it useful? Does it match things? Can I calibrate it to real data so that I can make it a predictive tool? And so anybody who's been doing modeling simulation knows this is a critical factor. So here's an example of one I took where we went through and did the modeling, and at the different levels, we started saying, do we have a problem with the loss of a bus? And it would show, then another failure mode would be loss of payload, and then you show the report failures or no failures. And again, these can be then expanded and decomposed to the lower levels till you get to the point where you can look at this. Now, again, this is one of those things where you're probably going to want to have random variables. You're going to have distributions. You could try simple distributions like triangular at first when you don't have good data to work from. But as you gain more data from your RAM analyses and looking at that, gathering actual statistics, you can form the right distributions and use the right distributions against it in the simulation. And so again, that's part of that calibration part that you'd be doing of the simulator. Here's an example again of the Monte Carlo output in this case. Again, this is showing you timeline of the potential of the loss, and then you see kind of a bow curve that in this particular example. Again, it's only available in our enterprise version at the moment. So let me jump to another topic in this area, in the O&S area, which is asset management. So we did another blog on asset management, and the tool can capture a lot of the kinds of information you want to in terms of tracking your assets and how they work. What are the characteristics of them and the properties. So if you see how we do that with the different parts of this, I'm showing you an example of an asset. In this case, it's an ice maker. It's an ice machine, and you can see the kind of capabilities it has. Specific characteristics for different models are being shown in the bottom right panel that it's related to. So those are characteristics that have specifics about the capacity of the different kinds of ice makers that are available to you. So you might want to track those different ones. Now, if you had those different ones in certain locations, you could show them wherever they are. On the physical map probably is what you'd be using. And of course, you could show them in different configurations at different times. So again, you can tie a time variable to it as well. So this kind of gives you a lot of the ability to track things and work with them over time. Another topic we mentioned was cost analysis. Again, we can take that model we create and look at maybe our operational processes, our standard operational procedures, and then use them to help do cost estimating. And so by executing this action diagram, you can see what you can add resources to it as well and cost, and then the simulator can execute the model and give you the total cost. Again, the spider diagram has been proving to be a very good data entry tool for doing this kind of work. And that was all in that blog, so you can go read the details in the blog. We'll hit a couple. I'll try to hit a couple points in the demo version here in a few minutes and do that. So just very quick, couple slides on project management, and then we can open it up to questions and demonstration. Project management stages. So you see, most of you are familiar with these different stages of development. Well, Innoslate can help you with making your business case by creating a project view. Basically, the project plans do usually include the business case as part of them. So that using the templates we have a business case option in it. Again, project plans for your project implementation directives can be part of that. You can also capture risks with your risk log using our risk entities and the risk matrix. You can track, of course, assets or stakeholders. So stakeholders are people. We consider those assets. You can see what they do. You tie information back to them and see what decisions they made or concerns they've issued. Decisions also can be captured here in the issues log, the status report, exception report. And then model-based reviews. One of the things we've been trying to tout is the idea that instead of just doing model-based systems engineering, producing a bunch of paper, doing a paper review, why not actually have them review the model? And so the way we've enabled that is our read-only version of the tool allows people to add comments to things. So you can add comments to diagrams, you can add comments to individual entities, and you'll find that that's a very quick and easy way to do your reviews. You can even set up a rubric for people to go through and evaluate the process in documents view. So you can give them that. You can create hyperlinks to the specific elements within the project. So a lot of power right here in the same tool to actually conduct your reviews and maybe cut your cost of your reviews significantly. Certainly, at least you can make them more asynchronous, which might be very desirable to a lot of people, given that oftentimes we want to review this. We've got people flung around the world who are needing to see different pieces of the puzzle and help perform the review. And of course, finally, we have end-of-project report. We've got, of course, many built-in reports, but we also have APIs, a complete software development kit, in fact, for developing custom reports. So you can do that as well. Okay, so some of the things, again, interactive models help us a lot. So we're not just doing drawings in a database like Visio or PowerPoint. The simulation helps us verify the models that we're developing for the project. Tying in the built-in requirements and management analysis capability lets us demonstrate how the project requirements are being satisfied. Our ontologicalist visualization gives us for processes, requirements, risks, decisions, ties it all together in a way that's very easy to see and easy to explain and easy to promote to the management as to, you know, how the project is doing. All kinds of other visualizations in the database, report creation, of course, and cost analysis, work breakdown structures. One of the things that I didn't show here that I think is important to realize from a management point of view, if I'm managing the project, I've been finding to be extremely useful is the notifications feature. What that does is it allows you to subscribe to specific elements or look at everything that people are doing. I like to look at everything people are doing on the project because I can see then who's doing what, when. And that helps me a lot in terms of managing the project and seeing how well the project is moving forward. So let's do a little live demonstration. I've not seen any questions yet, very specific things. Maybe we got some here. Okay. See, I'm not being able to read this very well, Lizzie. Okay. Yeah. See, what's it do? Pull it out. Just a moment here. I'm getting training. There we go. Okay, thank you. Okay, so I can read some of the questions here. Is supporting MODAF just a matter, one of the questions is supporting MODAF a matter of adding additional labels, or is it more significant? I'm not that familiar with MODAF, but as I understand it, is another set of diagrams, and again, most of the diagrams we have already cover that activity. So I would guess that that's probably heavily just adding labels. And how would you perform RAM analysis to compare two different architectures? Again, you want to then have your two different architectures. You may want them in two different projects or not. You could carry them in one project and then track the two different attributes and work through them. Do we support the SysML requirement diagram? Yes, we do. We support all the SysML diagrams. The tool has all that capability now. Okay, so that's the ones we have so far. Let me go ahead and bring on the tool. Over here. So a couple of things I wanted to show you. Again, here's the DODAF dashboard. You can see how easy this is to navigate. If I want to go to my AV1, I would just click on that AV1, and there it is. And so I can work through it. Notice we have baselining, so I can go see different baselines and create new baselines as I go through. The additional baseline that's already there is here. Another thing we have is the ability to go to the project plan. The project plan as well. That's in the same tool. So that's another version of the same thing. So, with a different template to it. Okay. So you have you carry lots of these different versions in the tool, baseline them and work together, or you can navigate using the sidebar here, the hierarchy. If I want to go to a specific element, and I want to click on the status, and notice again the sidebar here shows me the attributes associated with this that aren't on the statement itself. You can add comments right here. So again, this is a place where people are doing that kind of reviewing. You have that available to you right there. When you want to go back, just click back to the dashboard and go back to where you want. OB products I mentioned. Here's that context diagram. Looking at it live. If I click on a picture, there's the information about the picture. If I click on one of the lines, it shows it's a conduit. It has a capacity and a latency associated with it. Again, you can put in those with different numbers and different things. You can change the line types to be different look. So if I really want this to be a dashed line instead of binary, I can do that very easily. So you can see how you can work with that. Add a background by hitting the change background in the corner. I got another question here about how complete is the SysML meta model support. And not being a SysML aficionado, I will say that I don't know that well, so I would go and just simply select whatever the diagram is, and there's that information available to you. So again, all the information that was available on the previous, within the database, is automatically created for the diagram. So again, we have all of that ontology. We use the language of SysML on the left for your different different work. So I want to make sure I'm being driven by some of these different things. Another thing I wanted to show you was the model, a failure model. So one of the things about a failure model is you're going to continue to operate a vehicle until you hit a failure. Well, it depends what you put for probabilities of failure, but to do that, I have to actually do a little something, which is get the script for it. So to do that, I go up here and select the entity, and then under the More tab, there's something called SimScript. And these scripts are available. We have a little handy a way to show you how to develop these scripts yourself. It's JavaScript, so again, it's not some kind of weird syntax. It's something that you can buy hundreds of books on JavaScript and see what's going on with that. So this is showing that basically I'm looking for the failure mode. Has it failed or not? And so it continues as long as it's a no failure. As soon as that changes the value, it'll go false and the loop will finish. Let's go back to our process. So we have those kinds of scripts in the various diagrams that are available for it. And then here's the has a failure mode, so you can click into that and see that that's actually at another level where we show the different kinds of failure modes that are available. And again, these have different branch values. You want to see the specific branch value right now. Again, it's at the entity level. Put scripts. And you see the different values and probabilities. Right now, it is a 50-50 probability, but you can set, I'm sorry, actually it's 0.1. So 10% of the time you can have a flat. They must be driving on my road. It seems that I have a flat every 10% of the time I'm driving on the road. So, okay, so that's that particular model. This was the one about capacity. Again, this was showing you the asset side of things. This is a model of the ice machine. You can see the picture there. If you want to change the picture, it's really just as simple as going up the change bar here and looking at it. You can see the different capacities. So if I want to go see the characteristics, these are actually a subclass of characteristics as measures. This has the different parts of the value, projected value, threshold, and objective. And you can see improvement direction, things like that. So that gives you a little more detail about the machine and some of its specifications. The actual specification for this could be uploaded as an artifact and linked to this as well. So you can capture that kind of information. Let's see, what else do I have up here? Oh, and this is an example of showing you a cost model. So for a particular program, I'm showing the decomposition of it. That's what these P1, P.1.1, those kind of things are. Also discovered a risk. If you notice here on the left, when I clicked on it, here's the risk information. It shows you the probability and consequence, consequence description, things like that. Again, your metadata is available here. You can determine what kind of risk it is. Again, you can always add other labels if you don't like the label set we provide. And then, of course, mitigated by a conduit fix. So, in other words, one of the things we have to do for this conduit is making sure it's designed for privacy. So, doing that aspect of it. So, again, this may be a funny view for advanced users. You probably look at this kind of view a lot. If I wanted to look at the action diagram for that instead, that's the action diagram for it. You can see the different parts of it in composition and see how it's all tied together. So again, these are all executable diagrams. So that's a very quick aspect of it. So let's go back to questions. One of the questions was about risk. I believe I had a risk element in the previous thing I looked at here. Here we go. Risks. So any one of the risks, if you select the diagram, the risk matrix diagram, that's available. It's a 5x5. You can select the particular element, see the information about it here on the left. If I decide that it's a higher risk, I can move it to another quadrant and then change the probability and consequence. Or I can change the probability and consequence. Let's make this 50. And have it show you how that adjusts. So again, it's a fully interactive matrix. You definitely can use it as part of your safety kind of work. I think that was the question here. It says, can you demonstrate how to create a 5x5 risk matrix and talk about how they can be used for the part of safety document generated from the model? So again, this matrix can be tied together to the picture. If you want to capture any snapshot in time, you create a PNG. So you could actually then create that PNG file, and then if I wanted to go to the specific element here, I can go to the metadata and associate that up with that. seconds. But there's the actual matrix itself. So again, I can then make that part of a document, and I can tie it together in other ways. Okay. We have been migrating into the Q&A portion of this, so if there's any more questions, please let us know. Went faster than I expected, so I may be able to give you back some of your time, and I can dial into my other teleconference, which I imagine many of you have one of those too. Any other questions? If not, go ahead and email them to us later if you think of something else, you have other questions, other things you like to do. I do recommend you read the blogs and see what, there's a lot more detail in each one of the blogs for each of the steps. So, well, thank you very much, and come to our next one in October. We're going to be, let me show you that here. And please contact us whenever you can with any questions. Thank you.